Hey, Catherine, how you doing? All right, great job on your first iteration for Fire and Ice. This is actually really fantastic work so far. And by the way, your final iteration for Banana was just outstanding. So really, you're doing really good stuff here in terms of showing a uh, proficiency in understanding letter spacing, optimal letter spacing, and in this case, word spacing. So just by way of quick review, why is spacing so important? Letter spacing is important because it prevents the mind from perceiving words as a series of letters. If there was an unusually large space here between the A and the N, the mind wouldn't see that as and. The mind would see an A and an ND. So the mind, we would be forced to slow down right there so our mind could kind of register the extra space and organize things in such a way that it would be expeditious organization so that we can kind of take inventory of what's there and then move on. All right. We don't want that. We want the mind to be able to perceive all words as words and not series of letters. We take that a step further in our second trial by fire for Fire and Ice, and we say, all right, now what we want to do is we want to take a look at this phrase right here, and we want to be able to perceive it. We want our viewer to be able to perceive this as one phrase. So the letters in the individual words have to be spaced accordingly so that there's no unusual wide gaps there to stop the expeditious reading and understanding. And then also we want to make sure that the spaces between the words are also presented in a way that allows the viewer to read the phrase as one phrase and not a series of words. So we just kind of extrapolate what we've learned in Banana, and now we're applying it to three words instead of one word. And subsequently we'll learn how to take a look at body copy and say, okay, we want to determine the typographic color. Is the spacing between letters too close, too tight, that it creates a dark typographic color and impedes expeditious reading? We don't want that. We want everything to be able to be perceived as natural and and normal in terms of spacing. Okay, and again, the reason is so that our viewer can register this particular phrase as a phrase and not three words. And again, by way of example, if this space right here were too wide, we would perceive this as fire and ice as opposed to fire and ice. If this space was wider than this space, of course we would read this as fire and ice. And of course, we don't want those extra breaks unless they're intended. And if they are intended, quite often we will demarcate those with punctuation and not a space. Okay, so that's just a quick review. You know that, right? I'm just going over things that by way of review. All right, so Fire and Ice. I think your letter forms are beautiful. Really nice job. Excellent placement of baseline, mean line, cap line, and of course you have learned and you have shown that you have learned that basically the way to start this exercise is get that baseline nice and level, and then get the mean line and cap line to be perfectly parallel. It's kind of setting up the foundation for success, so to speak. So I think, yes, your letter spacing, I think, is pretty good. So at any rate, to continue, I have typeset the phrase fire and ice. And I have basically what I consider to be perfect letter spacing and word spacing. And the reason I say that is it's set for display type, which means that it's set for a large large font size. As we can see right now, we are at, let me see, where's my character palette right here. So we're at Adobe Garamond Pro at basically a very large size. So what we're saying here is that this is going to be set for display type because it's larger than 16 points, right? So this would be headline or display. That said, the spaces are amplified the larger the type gets. So we really have to pay attention to letter spacing and word spacing in display and headline type. I think the letter spacing is pretty darn good through here. One of the issues I think we're having is that your letter forms are you're much heavier in your stroke weight than what is indicated in the actual typeface. So we want to reduce that. Those are just too thick. Those vertical strokes, I'm sorry, those vertical stems right here, 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 here. As we can see, they're really thick. So you want to kind of finesse these out a little bit and try to get them to be thin and streamlined like they're appearing in the example above. As far as the spacing goes, as I said, fire, I think that's a good start right there. I think the space between the I and R is too close because those serifs are really right on top of each other now. It's okay for serifs to touch. In display settings and headline settings, you don't want serifs to touch in body copy. It's okay if they touch in headline, but you don't want them to touch to the point where it's creating a new shape. It's just a continuation of that serif. So if these two right here are touching slightly, that's fine. But right here, they're jumbled up together, creating a whole new shape there. And that you don't want. I also think the space between the R and the I is very, very tight as well, as you can see here. The A and the N, again, is a little bit tight. And again, that serif is just so thick down there. It's really hard to ascertain the success because this whole shape right here has so much visual weight due to the fact that serif for the lowercase a is meeting the serif for the lowercase n. However, they're both so thick that they're creating a whole new shape down here. And you don't want that. So a little bit of space between the A and the N. And if you notice, none of my serifs are touching. And that is just the way that this is typeset. Now, if we close down the kerning a little bit on this, some of the serifs would touch, and it could still be perfectly acceptable. But that would entail closing down the entire kerning for all of the letter forms. So, okay, so the space between N and D is perfect. Ice looks great. I think ice looks just about perfect. Really nice job there. One of the things I'm seeing, I think you've got a really great rendering of the letter forms themselves. Good optical relationships for the most part, but I think one thing we really need to do is show this difference in this is the stress, right? This is the vertical stress, and this is shown by the variable width stroke. So we can see right through there. See how thin that stroke is up on the E right there and how thick it is right there. Really want to show that right there. That should be much thinner. Same thing with the teardrop, the arm of the R right there. See how thin it is right there and see how it's a teardrop shape. So you really want to try to depict the letters to a higher degree of consistency. And as far as, I think the word spacing and letter spacing, for the most part, are good. Letter spacing is a little bit tight. Word spacing is just about perfect. Now, a couple of things that you're showing here that you don't, right now, you're showing overshoot on the bottom of the curved letter forms, right? We're clearly seeing overshoot here, and that's great. When we can see overshoot here, on all the curved letter forms, we can see overshoot on the bottom baseline. But you're not accommodating for overshoot on the mean line. So as we can see right here, the mean line clearly, the curved letter forms clearly rise above the mean line just a bit, but we're not seeing that near. We can see it in the D, definitely, but not in the E, not in the C, not in the N, not in the A, this E, this R, and this I. See how that I, the apex of that serif, kind of rises above a little bit above that mean line? So you definitely want to get those relationships established as well. Other than that, I think it's a fantastic start. Just a little bit, clean up those letters a little bit. I think they're a little bit too thick in terms of the width of their stroke width. So you want to clean those up a little bit. See how much more streamlined they look. They're just a little too chubby down here. So you want to clean those up. Just watch your letter spacing a little bit. Word spacing is great. Watch your overshoot and you are good to go. All right, fantastic start. If you have any questions at all, please let me know. I'll be glad to make any needed clarifications. Thank you very much, Catherine.